The Last of Us TV show does not understand women. I'm gonna start by saying that I love The Last of Us as a franchise. Like many people, I grew up with the games. I first played part 1 when I was just 13 on release. I did get too scared at a clicker section and have to take a multi-year break, but I did eventually build up the courage to face the clickers. I came back, I defeated them, and I fell in love with The Last of Us. But honestly, the day when I became a true The Last of Us fan was June 19th, 2020, the release of The Last of Us Part 2, the day before my birthday. It was mid-pandemic. My life felt utterly uprooted. I had just moved across the country twice because my college dorm got shut down. I was so sad, about to turn 19, freshly realizing I was queer, and everything felt uncertain. Then I played The Last of Us Part 2. That game, as you can probably tell, came at the perfect time for me. I was 19, which was the same age as Ellie, in the middle of a pandemic, and honestly just looking for an escape. I played it and finished it in 3 days. I was devastated, and I was moved, and I felt so seen. But now that it's 5 years later and it's come time to see that story brought to life on a TV screen, something has changed. Something important was seemingly lost. The Last of Us TV show does not understand women, and I'm going to tell you why. The Last of Us Part 2 gave us something rare. It showcased women who were strong, messy, tender, flawed, and felt so real. Abby and Ellie weren't just badass, they were fully realized people. They had diverse body types, different sexualities, complex identities, and they were allowed to exist outside the male gaze. Ellie and Dina's queer relationship felt natural, not performative, and it was hugely impactful for me, someone who was just discovering that she was queer. It didn't exist to prove a point, it just was. For someone like me at the point where I was in my journey, that was so important. And I don't think that impact was understood within the Last of Us TV show. In fact, I don't think they understand women point blank. Now, we're gonna go back to the beginning and start with Tess. I thought this was a one-off, but season 2 has shown me that it's not. In the show, Tess is introduced as a strong, capable smuggler who is Joel's love interest. Well, kind of. There's a bit of a will they, won't they energy, but the viewer can tell that there's some serious chemistry between them. But within 2 episodes, Tess is gone, reduced to a single character trait, that she's an attractive love interest. This is fully realized in her death scene, the infected kiss. Watching the scene, I had a visceral reaction. I felt uncomfortable and I felt kind of violated and a little triggered. And then I listened to the podcast, and during it, the director talked about how the scene was beautiful and it showed love from the infected. And it made me really understand that there was a misunderstanding of a woman's experience. Because, and I will say my scope is only the people that I know and talk to, but every single woman that I've talked to about that scene has said that they felt violated by it and that it felt very akin to assault. So to hear someone describe it as beautiful was so disappointing. Tess was reduced down in that very moment to an objectifiable love interest that's just there as an object to add beauty to the scene. She wasn't seen anymore as a complex woman who would experience the trauma that that interaction would incur. Instead of being a woman dying on her terms, she became a symbol of beauty. She's no longer a person. She's a love interest, a woman defined by a single trait. But I'll be honest with you, I had thought that the Tess scene was a one-off. That was basically my only criticism of season 1, and I didn't think that anything like that would occur again. But I was so wrong. Now we go to season 2, and we're gonna turn to Mel. In the show, Mel is pregnant. That's no different from the game. But in the show so far, and this may change, that's pretty much all that we know. She's barely developed beyond that. And when she dies, her last plea isn't about her life or her values. It's take the baby out. That scene was shocking to me, honestly. Not only because it read as a cheap way to traumatize Ellie, but in what it says about how the show views women. Mel is reduced to being just a pregnant woman, nothing more, not a medic. And while yes, it's true, in the game when we're playing as Ellie, we also really only know that Mel is pregnant and that's about it. At the very least, Mel's death is on her terms. She fights back and it's not wholly defined by her pregnancy. In fact, Ellie doesn't know that Mel is pregnant until Owen mentions it in his dying words, which is, in my opinion, a lot more impactful. But I think that women, no matter if they're pregnant or not, are so much more than that. And I do understand that there is somewhat of a primal instinct that is within pregnant women. However, Mel's death seems to continue to establish a trend of boiling women down to a single trait. Just like Tess, in death, she was defined by a single personality trait. But if you don't believe me about that, then let's look at Ellie and Dina. I know you were waiting for this one. Honestly, Ellie and her relationship with Dina is the biggest disappointment for me. In the show's second season, Ellie is unrecognizable from the game. She's immature and annoying and incompetent. She feels less like a traumatized 19-year-old and more like a clumsy caricature of a 15-year-old. She's not allowed to be sharp or resourceful like in the game, or scrappy. Instead, other characters constantly question her abilities. I'm looking at you, Jesse and Dina. And honestly, the show seems to agree with that sentiment. She's defined by labels: immature, impulsive, gay, Joel's surrogate daughter who is 19. That's it. No depth, no nuance. Nothing. And very similarly, Dina. In the game, Dina was a confident bisexual. She wasn't scared to show her feelings to Ellie. It was uncomplicated, and she was fully and truly herself. She was fully fleshed out early on. We learned about how she got a scar from falling on a knife because she tried to ride a skateboard. And we learned about her religion and her sister Talia, who died. Early on in the game, Dina was so much more than just Ellie or Jesse's love interest. She was a full person. But in the show, that's a completely different story. She's a checklist full of bisexual stereotypes, and for the first half of the season, only really defined by being either Ellie or Jesse's love interest. It wasn't until over halfway through the season that we find out any further characterization about Dina. Until then, she was just a cliché bisexual. Flirty, indecisive, manipulative even. The director literally called her a quote mindfuck in the podcast. And that's not queer representation. One of the most confusing moments for me watching the show was the post-pregnancy announcement sex scene and their conversation thereafter. You know, that I'm gonna be a dad conversation. It felt like the severity of the moment was completely misunderstood, and just general interactions between queer women was severely misunderstood. It also felt like whoever was writing the characters just found out about U-Haul lesbians, which led to Ellie calling herself a dad. I have many thoughts on that, but that would be a whole different video for me to get into that. Ellie and Dina's relationship in the game felt like home to me as a queer person. It was a true realization of what a Sapphic relationship looks like in real life. It wasn't performative, it was just real. And in the show, it honestly feels like someone just looked up bisexual and lesbian in Urban Dictionary and called it a day. So we're seeing a pattern here. Each prominent woman in the show was seemingly boiled down to a defining personality trait, or at least a variation. Just one note. Tess, an attractive love interest or an object. Mel, a pregnant woman. Dina, a bisexual love interest. And Ellie, immature and incompetent and gay. Maybe a little more than one for Ellie, but hey, she's the main character. She can have 3 defining traits at least. It feels like every woman in the show is boiled down to one or a few traits and then discarded or mishandled by writers who don't seem to understand women, much less queer women. I'm honestly kind of convinced that there weren't any women in the writer's room, and that hurts because the game did it so right. For a moment in season 1, I had so much hope. While the Tess scene made me a little bit uncomfortable, Bill and Frank's episode was tender and beautiful and human, but that care didn't extend to the women of the show. For those of us who saw ourselves in the game, queer people, women, it felt like a betrayal. Instead of building on what made the game revolutionary, the show flattens its women into ideas and tropes and cliches. And it didn't have to be that way. The Last of Us video games gave such a good script, such a good outline for how women and queer people should be written. They gave us women who were fierce and soft and brutal and complicated and utterly flawed. But the TV show took away all nuance and just gave us caricatures of women, flattened by misunderstandings and framed by the male gaze. I watched the show with such good faith, hoping to continue to feel seen in my favorite series, but instead, I felt erased. The Last of Us TV show does not understand women, and honestly, I'm scared for season 3.